Me and my friends, Ashley, Jordan, and Sam, are urban explorers in our free time. You're probably familiar with the type of stuff we do, but in case you're not, then the gist of it is that we explore abandoned locations while recording on our phones. We upload the videos on YouTube. Old abandoned warehouses, amusement parks, industrial complexes, you name it, we've done it. It's a fun hobby, but it can be scary, not to mention dangerous. Some of these places are condemned structures, so dilapidated that they look as though one strong breeze would knock them down. You have to be careful while navigating those places, and constantly stop to inspect your surroundings. You never know when a rotted stairway might give out under your feet, or when a rusted catwalk will collapse and send you plunging 50 feet down to a concrete floor. Not to mention the additional possibility of running into some strung-out drug addict or a crazed homeless person squatting there. Plus, what we do isn't exactly legal, so we've had some close calls. Once, a security guard chased us out of a deserted factory, and another time, someone actually called the cops on us. But luckily, the guy wasn't a hard ass, and he let us go with just a warning. You probably think we're stupid or crazy to do what we do. Maybe you're right, but that's just the way we are. We enjoy the thrill of it. 2 weeks ago, Sam got a tip on a place that seemed like primo material for our next video, especially with Halloween approaching. An old and crumbling down mental hospital in the next county over. It had been built in the late 1800s and abandoned for the last 30 years, since early 90s, I believe, with a pretty sordid past. Supposedly, it was shut down after some kind of scandal involving an investigative reporter who went undercover as a patient and uncovered all kinds of abuse and neglect on the staff's part. There were even rumors that the doctors were conducting all kinds of fucked up secret experiments on the patients. None of that is substantiated, of course. It's just the type of typical bullshit urban legends that spring up around places like that. The official story is the hospital was closed due to the government cutting their funding for budget reasons. According to Sam, the place was scheduled to be demolished soon in order to put up an apartment complex, so this was likely our only chance to check it out. Last weekend, the four of us hopped into Jordan's old Mazda, and we made the 2-hour drive out there. The institution was located in a relatively rural area on the outskirts of a city, and as soon as it came into view, we knew we wouldn't be disappointed. A foreboding, gray stone building, 4 stories tall with narrow barred windows standing in the midst of a sprawling, heavily overgrown lawn, behind a high chain-link fence with rusting razor wire coiled over the top. The main gate was adorned with a faded "No Trespassing" sign marked with several .22 bullet holes, and secured with a thick chain pinned by a heavy padlock. After a few minutes of poking around, Ashley found a place in the fence where some intrepid explorer before us had snipped a decent-sized hole through the chain link, probably with a bolt cutter. We slipped through it easily and made our way up the long, overgrown driveway towards the main building. The closer we got, the more creeped out I started to feel. The immense building seemed to loom over us with its imposing facade, almost resembling a scowling face with many narrowed eyes that stared coldly at the 4 intruders approaching. The main entrance doors had been nailed shut at some point, but someone, presumably the same one who cut through the fence, had pried off the sheet of plywood that had once covered them, and they stood wide open, like the gaping maw of a beast, getting ready to swallow its prey whole. We paused for a couple of minutes, still about 20 yards away, so Sam could film Jordan standing in front of the institution, as he did a brief intro. Then we closed the last of the distance with all of our phones recording, and we entered the decrepit building. We were in the main lobby reception area. The floor was littered with a medley of debris and trash, dead leaves blown through the open doors, empty beer cans, fast food wrappers, cigarette butts, you name it. Likely stuff left over by kids using the building as a hangout, and homeless people looking for a place to get drunk and crash for the night. The walls were marked with graffiti, and one of those old-school steel bedpans was sat on top of the reception desk. None of us dared approach it for a closer inspection. We looked around for a while and found the main stairway. It was standing next to the long, dead elevators. No electricity. We went upstairs to explore the 2nd floor, and it was the administrative wing. Offices mostly, and honestly didn't have anything interesting in or about them. The place had been pretty thoroughly cleared out when it shut down, so all that remained were some empty filing cabinets and discarded pieces of ancient office equipment. In the hospital director's office, an old cardboard shoebox stood open on an otherwise bare desk. When I peered inside it, it contained a number of old audio cassette tapes still in their cases. I flipped through a dozen of them curiously, reading the names and dates carefully printed on their labels. Didn't know what they were, but Sam suggested they might be recordings of therapy sessions with the patients. So I grabbed one at random and threw it in my pocket for a souvenir. We then continued our investigation, filming anything that might be even remotely interesting. Truthfully, the whole trip was kind of a letdown, as there wasn't much to see or film. The top 2 floors were patient rooms, but nearly all were completely vacant, except a few with pieces of rusting bed frames, some litter, and the occasional graffiti artist tag. The place didn't even have a particularly sinister or creepy ambiance once you were inside. There were no operating tables splattered with dried blood or rusted surgical implements. Not even a single spooky abandoned wheelchair standing in a corridor. The institution had been minimum security when it was in operation, so it wasn't like there had been any especially violent or dangerous patients kept locked up there. In other words, there was no dungeon ward in the basement where the likes of Hannibal Lecter was locked away from the general population. It could have been an office building for all the atmosphere it provided. After about an hour of this, we decided to call it quits, with Jordan filming the outro and apologizing to the audience for the disappointing video. Then we left. Just got in the car and drove home without incident. I went on with my normal routine and had pretty much forgotten about our exploration of the mental hospital. Until Wednesday morning, when I was getting ready to leave for work. I couldn't find my car keys. They were normally in my pants pocket. I began desperately hunting through my apartment for them in a rush to not be late. Looking in my jacket pocket, I found the tape instead of my keys. The tape I had swiped from the institution and completely forgotten about. I had other priorities then, so I just tossed it into my work desk for the time being and continued searching for my keys. Found them eventually. They'd slipped from my pants pockets and in between my couch cushions. I managed to get to work only a few minutes late. That evening, when I returned and spotted it on my desk after dinner, I decided to give it a closer inspection. It was one of those 90-minute jobs that fit into a full-sized portable tape recorder. Carefully printed on the label by hand in faded black ink were the words, Bennett Michael, with a date 8/17/91. Intrigued, I went into the shared storage and dug out my dad's old recorder, popped fresh batteries in it, and inserted the cassette. Not entirely sure if either would still manage to function after so long, but figured it was worth a try. I plugged a pair of earbuds into the recorder and set them in my ears, pressed play, and for a few seconds there was only a hissing sound, before a dry clinical man's voice spoke in professional monotone. The audio quality was surprisingly clear, and only slightly degraded, even after 30 years.
Patient 67531, Bennett S. Michael. Session number 7. Session conducted by Dr. Eugene Winters at 2 p.m. on August 17th, 1991.
There were a few seconds of hissing silence. Then the audio resumed, with the only sound of another man's heavy, slightly uneven breathing, until the clinical man's voice spoke again.
How are you feeling today, Michael?
The ragged breathing continued with no answer.
Michael?
A second voice spoke, and it sounded like it belonged to a younger man. The voice was tight and agitated with suppressed emotion. The voice of a man in turmoil, struggling to maintain composure.
What the fuck do you care how I feel? What does it matter anyway? There's nothing you can do. You just ask me the same goddamn question over and over again every single time.
The emotion behind those words could have been rage, or something else.
It's an integral part of your therapy, Michael. We have to get to the root of whatever is the source of your mental distress in order to give you the proper treatment you require, so that you can function normally again and return to society. Bullshit!
The younger man interrupted with a shout.
You're just playing with my fucking head like all the other shrinks did. To you, I'm just another freak you can play your little mind games on. Some nut you can exploit to get published in all the big shot medical journals.
The doctor spoke softly.
I'm only trying to help you, Michael. There's nothing you can do to help me, Doc. There's nothing anyone can do.
There was anger in the voice, but something else, too. Fear.
Please, Michael, you have to work with me if you want to get out of here. You refuse to tell the others what you're so afraid of. What causes you to wake up in the night screaming? Why don't you tell me, Michael? Tell me what you've been so scared of all of these years.
Several moments of silence. Then he spoke, all the rage gone, but the fear remained.
Fine. I'll tell you, just so I can tell someone and finally get it out. Y'all think I'm crazy, but everyone already does. That's why I'm in this loony bin, so why the fuck not? Do you know what it's like to live your whole life knowing the worst thing you could ever know, Doctor? The worst thing anyone could ever know. Do you know what it's like to live every single moment in pure terror? Terror of what, Michael? What if you could see things that other people couldn't? Things that people weren't meant to see. Know things humans weren't meant to know. I can see these things, Doctor. And it started when I was 8 or 9. That's when I first started seeing them. Them? The Forgotten Ones. That's what I call them. They call themselves the Ancient Ones, or the Originals. What are they, Michael? These Forgotten Ones. People talk about hauntings, about seeing ghosts. You hear about it all the time. Some people even claim to be able to communicate with them or channel them for a living. Spiritualists, psychics, whatever you want to call them. Most of them are full of bullshit. Frauds. But maybe a few are the real thing. Psychics deal with dead people. Human ghosts. If it was the ghosts of people, I might be able to cope with that. Maybe I could have gotten used to it and come to accept it with time. But the Forgotten Ones are not human, and they never were. Go on, Michael, I'm listening. They're old. Very, very old. They died long before mankind ever existed on Earth. But before they died, they lived here for a very long, long time. The planet is billions of years old, Doc. Humans have only been around for a couple million. Do you honestly think ours was the first civilization to ever exist? That no one was here before us? They were the original rulers of Earth. They've been dead for hundreds of millions of years, long before even the dinosaurs came along. But their spirits are still here. They always have been. Invisible to us, watching us. There's no afterlife, you see. No heaven, no hell. So when you die, your spirit is just stuck here. Forever. The Forgotten Ones saw the human race evolve. They saw our civilizations rise. And they hate us. They've always hated us. They see us as intruders, invaders, thieves who took the world that was once theirs for ourselves. I see. Yeah, sure you do. What do these Forgotten Ones look like, Michael? You don't want to know. They're monstrous, beyond description, and so full of rage and envy and vengeance. I know this because they tell me. They communicate to you? Oh yes, all the time. They know I can see them. But I can't understand what they're saying when I'm awake. They speak their own language. But when I'm asleep, they come to me in my dreams, and then I can understand. The Forgotten Ones hate us, but they can't harm us. They can't touch us because they're ghosts, and we're alive. We're safe from them, as long as we're alive. But when we die, when our spirits separate from our mortal bodies, and we cross over into their realm, then it's payback time.
There was a long pause. The doctor said nothing to break the silence, and the man continued.
Whoever came up with the notion of hell, of demons, of tortured souls and eternal damnation, maybe they caught a glimpse of what the Forgotten Ones do to the spirits of the dead.
That was where the recording ended. The audio cut off and the hissing silence resumed. I listened for a couple more minutes, but there was nothing else. Then I turned off the recorder, ejected the cassette tape, and just sat staring at it for a long time in a disturbed silence after what I had just listened to. Out of curiosity, I entered Michael S. Bennett and the name of the mental hospital into Google and did a search. I found an obituary in a local newspaper for a Michael Samuel Bennett. He had died on November 11th, 1994 at the age of 31, but the obit didn't say how, so I did a bit more digging and found another newspaper article about his death. He had died alone in his apartment of liver failure after a long struggle with alcohol addiction. There was a picture of a man with a gaunt face and dark, haunted eyes. I couldn't find anything to suggest that he had a history of mental health issues, or that he had been a patient of the institution. Maybe his family had wanted to keep that out of the paper, or maybe the hospital records had been kept confidential. Maybe it wasn't even the same guy. The things that guy said on the tape still creep me out. He sounded so convinced, so sincere about the things he claimed to be able to see. I tell myself I'm making a big deal out of nothing, that what I heard had been nothing but the rambling, paranoid delusions of an extremely disturbed mental patient. And that's all it is, right? That's all it can be, right?